I still remember the chill in the air that day, the heavy grey clouds hanging low over the cemetery, as though even the heavens themselves mourned with me. The rain fell in steady streams, soaking through my black dress, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. My father, the only anchor in my life, the only one who had loved me unconditionally, was gone. I knelt before his grave, fingers trembling as I placed a white lily against the polished stone, my vision blurred with tears, my voice cracked, trembling from grief. Papa, you told me to be strong. You told me to trust carefully, to never give my heart lightly. And yet, I gave it to him. You trusted him too. You believed he would protect me. That's why, on your last day, you made him promise. Behind me, a hand rested lightly on my shoulder. His hand. My husband's. He looked solemn, face shadowed by the umbrella he held over us both. His suit was immaculate, his posture commanding as always. But there was something cold in his eyes, something I chose not to see that day. Father-in-law, he said softly, voice calm and steady, I swear to you, here and now, that I will protect your daughter with my life. I will never betray her, never let her suffer, never let anyone take her place in my heart. On your grave I vow, she will be the only one. I sobbed harder, pressing my forehead to the grave. His vow echoed in the rain, searing itself into my heart like fire. I believed him. Oh, how foolishly I believed him. For years after, I carried those words with me, clinging to them like a lifeline. Every fight, every distance between us, every time he came home late, smelling faintly of perfume, I didn't own. I reminded myself of that vow. My father's grave had been witness. How could a man dare break such a promise? But promises mean nothing to a man who has already given his heart elsewhere. The first time I saw her, she was a shadow in the corner of his office. I had brought lunch for him, smiling, hoping to ease his exhaustion from work. She sat there, legs crossed elegantly, her lipstick too red, her gaze too bold. She looked at me, the way a predator eyes its prey. He introduced her casually, as though she were no one. This is just my assistant, just his assistant. Yet his eyes softened when they turned to her, a softness I had not seen in a long time. I should have walked away then. I should have confronted him, demanded the truth. But I didn't. I told myself I was paranoid, insecure, imagining things. And then there was our son. When he was born, I thought things would change. I thought my husband would finally see me, see us, as his family. For a time, it seemed that way. He held our baby with tears in his eyes, kissed my forehead gently, whispered, "We are a family now. I will never leave you," but promises. Again, just words. The cracks widened slowly, painfully, like glass breaking under pressure. He stopped eating dinner with us. He stopped looking at me. He stopped coming home altogether some nights. And when he did, he smelled of her. One evening, as I tucked our son into bed, I heard his voice downstairs. Harsh, low, desperate. I crept to the staircase, my heart pounding. "She keeps clinging to me," he hissed. "But you're the one I love. You're the one I want." And then her voice, sweet, cruel. "Then leave her. Stop pretending. Choose me, and I'll give you everything." I nearly fell down the stairs, the pain in my chest so sharp it felt like a knife. I stumbled back into the bedroom, clutching my son to my chest, as tears streamed silently down my cheeks. The next day, I confronted him. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. "You swore," I whispered, "at my father's grave. You swore you'd never betray me. How could you? How could you do this to me, to our son?" For the first time, he didn't even bother to deny it. His face hardened, his eyes empty of warmth. "Love changes," he said flatly. "Don't cling to the past. Don't use your father's grave to bind me. I've chosen her. And our son. He will be raised by us, not you." His words shattered me. Not only had he broken his vow, He was stealing away the one piece of me that still had meaning. Our child. I fell to my knees, the world spinning, the vow, my father's grave, his promises, all lies. That night, under the same stormy sky, where he had once sworn his loyalty, I stood alone, broken. My heart could no longer hold the weight of betrayal. My body trembled, my soul exhausted. And there at my father's grave once more, I whispered through tears, "Papa." He broke his vow. He chose her. He took our son. I have nothing left. The cold rain drenched me, and darkness pulled me under. My last thought was simple, aching, raw. If only I could live again. I would never let him hurt me first. I would leave before he could betray me. I would change my fate, and with that thought, my world went black. Darkness. That was all there was when my final breath left me. Thick, suffocating, endless darkness. It wrapped around me like a shroud, dragging me deeper and deeper, until even my pain felt distant. For a while, I welcomed it. At least in this emptiness, I couldn't feel his betrayal. At least here, I didn't have to see the image of my husband holding another woman's hand, hear his cold words, or imagine my son calling someone else mother. But then, there was a flicker, like a candle flame trembling in the void, small but stubborn. It pulsed inside me, warm and insistent. No, a voice echoed. Not mine, not my father's, but something ancient and commanding. Your story is not finished. You are not done. And then I felt it, a rush of air filling my lungs, the sting of sunlight against my eyelids. My body convulsed. I gasped, my chest heaving, as though I had been pulled violently from drowning. My eyes flew open. The first thing I saw was light, bright golden sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of spring blossoms. Not rain, not the grave, not the cold stone of betrayal. My heart thudded painfully as I sat up, clutching the sheets. My hands looked different, slimmer, smoother, untouched by years of struggle. My breathing quickened. I staggered to the mirror across the room, my bare feet cool against the polished floor. And when I saw the reflection staring back at me, I froze. It was me, but not the me I had become before death. Not the weary, broken woman with hollow eyes and tear-stained cheeks. No, this was me years ago, younger, brighter. The woman I had been before marriage, before betrayal, before my father's death. I pressed trembling fingers to my face. My skin was smooth, untouched by grief. My eyes, still wide, still filled with light. No, this can't be, I whispered. My voice was higher, less worn. I spun around the room, searching for proof I wasn't dreaming. On the desk was a calendar. It was years before my marriage. Years before my father passed. My knees gave way, and I sank to the floor, tears streaming silently down my face. I was alive. I was young again. I had been reborn. At first, my mind reeled. Panic clawed at me. Was this a dream? A cruel trick? But then, memories surged. My husband's betrayal. His vow at my father's grave. His cold eyes as he declared his love for her. My son's small, fragile hand being pulled away from mine. The ache, the pain, the suffocating despair. Every detail burned into me. And then, my last desperate thought before death. If only I could live again, I would never let him hurt me first. I would leave before he could betray me. Was this the answer? A second chance. I lay on the floor for a long time, my chest rising and falling in ragged sobs. Relief, fear, anger, determination. They all clashed inside me until one thought crystallized, sharp as glass. This time, I would not be the same woman. This time, I would not wait for him to betray me. This time, I would leave first. The door creaked open suddenly, snapping me from my storm of thoughts. Daughter! That voice, steady, strong, filled with warmth. My heart lurched violently. I scrambled to my feet, hardly daring to believe. And there he was, my father, alive. He stood in the doorway, dressed in his simple but neat clothes, his hair streaked with grey, his eyes kind and steady as always. The man I had buried, the man whose grave I had wept at, stood breathing before me. Papa. I choked out, my throat tight. Tears blurred my vision again. What's wrong? He asked, stepping closer, concern creasing his brow. Did you have a nightmare? I stumbled into his arms before I could stop myself. My body trembled violently as I clung to him, sobbing into his chest. He stiffened for a moment, surprised, then wrapped his arms around me, patting my back gently. There, you're safe, daughter. Whatever it was, it's over. Safe. That word nearly broke me all over again. I wanted to tell him everything, that I had died, that I had seen his grave, that I had been betrayed, that fate had twisted and turned cruelly against me. But how could I? He wouldn't understand. No one would. So instead, I held him tighter, vowing silently in my heart, this time, I will protect you. I will protect myself. I will protect everything we lost. When I finally pulled back, wiping at my swollen eyes, he frowned slightly. You've changed, daughter. Your eyes, they look older. What happened? I forced a smile through my tears. I just had a very real dream, Peppa, but it reminded me of something important. I can't take life for granted. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, though confusion lingered in his gaze. That night, I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling. My mind churned with plans, fears, and determination. In my last life, I had been naive. I had believed every sweet word, every vow. I had clung to a man who did not deserve my love, sacrificing everything, my pride, my happiness, even my health, for him. And what did I receive? Betrayal. But not this time. This time I would not repeat my mistakes. I would not give my heart so easily. I would not cling. I would not be weak. And when the time came, when he tried to bind me with vows, when he tried to cage me with sweet words, I would be the one to walk away first. The thought filled me with a strange, unfamiliar strength. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel powerless. I felt alive. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror again. My reflection was still young, still untouched by pain. But my eyes were different now. They no longer belonged to a naive girl. They belonged to a woman who had seen betrayal, death, and rebirth. A woman determined to change her fate. I brushed my hair back, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to my reflection, this time, I will not be the one left behind. This time, I will not let him take everything from me. This time, I will leave first. And as those words left my lips, I knew my new life had truly begun. The days that followed my awakening felt surreal. Every familiar corner of my home, every word from my father's lips, every scent carried by the breeze, all of it was a miracle. I never thought I'd touch again, but miracles are fleeting unless you know how to hold them. This second chance wasn't just a gift, it was a responsibility. I couldn't let myself slip back into the same blind path that had destroyed me before. I rose earlier than usual one morning, sunlight spilling across my desk as I opened a blank notebook. I had no time to waste. If I wanted to change my fate, I had to plan. My pen scratched across the paper, listing everything I remembered from my previous life. The exact year my father's health began to decline. The month I met him, the man who would one day become my husband. The moment he charmed my father with sweet words. The day we married. The birth of our son. And finally, the mistress. Each word I wrote bled with memory, but I forced myself to continue. Pain was nothing compared to the chance of freedom. When the page was filled, I set down my pen and whispered, this time, I won't follow the same steps. I stared at the line under his name. My husband. No, the man who had betrayed me. The man who had knelt at my father's grave, swearing eternal loyalty, only to toss me aside when it suited him. In this life, I would meet him again, but I would not fall for him. The thought both relieved and terrified me, because even now, even with all my memories, I couldn't forget how easily he had charmed me before. His confidence, his ambition, his ability to make a girl believe she was the center of his world. Those things had blinded me once, but not again, not this time. A week later, the day came when fate tested me. I had gone to the university library, books stacked high in my arms, when I heard his voice. Deep, steady, commanding, just as I remembered. I froze in place, my heart lurching painfully against my ribs. There he was, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp as a hawk's. His suit fit perfectly, his tie loose around his collar. His presence filled the room effortlessly, drawing gazes without him even trying. In my last life, my knees had gone weak when I first saw him. My cheeks had flushed. My heart had whispered, "This is it. This is the man." But in this life, all I felt was a cold weight in my stomach. I already knew the ending to his story. He noticed me immediately. His gaze swept over the crowd, locking onto me like a predator spotting prey. And then he smiled. That smile, warm, confident, disarming. A smile that had once made me believe he was safety itself. I forced my lips into a polite curve and lowered my eyes, refusing to let him see the storm raging inside me. "Excuse me," he said smoothly, stepping closer. "You dropped something." I glanced down. A book had slipped from my pile. He bent, picked it up, and held it out to me. Our fingers brushed. Once, that touch would have sent electricity down my spine. Now it made me want to recoil. "Thank you," I said softly, taking the book. My voice was steady, neutral, no trace of awe. His brows lifted slightly, as though surprised. He was used to women blushing, stammering, leaning into his charm. "Not me, not anymore. He prompted, waiting for my name. I gave it, short and clipped. No flutter, no smile. "Ah," he said, lips curving. "I've heard of you. Your father is—" "My father is a good man." I cut him off, my tone sharp enough to make him pause. "And I hope you respect that." His eyes narrowed, just a fraction. I had unsettled him. "Good." I hugged my books to my chest and gave a small bow. "Thank you again for the book. I won't keep you." Then I turned and walked away. Every step felt like fire in my veins. My instincts screamed at me to glance back, to soak in the sight of him one more time. But I didn't. I kept my head high, my pace steady, until I reached the quiet of the stacks. Only then did I let myself breathe. I pressed my back against the shelves, clutching the books tightly. My heart pounded, but not from attraction, from victory, because I had done it. The girl I used to be would have fallen instantly, dazzled by his charm. But this time, I had looked into the eyes of the man who would one day destroy me, and walked away first. A small smile tugged at my lips. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The first step in rewriting my destiny. That evening, over dinner, my father asked, "Did anything interesting happen today?" I hesitated, chopsticks hovering over my bowl. In my last life, this would have been the day I breathlessly told him about meeting the most handsome man I'd ever seen. The day I begged him to let me meet him again. The day he, out of love for me, welcomed that man into our home. And the day our ruin began. I lowered my eyes. Nothing worth mentioning. My father studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've changed, daughter. Your eyes are calmer. You don't chatter like before." Did something happen? A soft smile curved my lips. I just learned that some things aren't as important as they seem. What matters most is protecting what we already have. My father reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. Wise words. I don't know what caused this change, but I'm proud of you. His pride burned warmly in my chest. It was the kind of love I had once traded away foolishly. Not this time. Not ever again. But destiny doesn't surrender so easily. In the following weeks, he appeared again and again. At the library, at lectures, at charity events, always with that same charming smile. Always offering small kindnesses. Always trying to draw me closer. And each time, I kept my distance. Polite but cold. Respectful but unreachable. At first he seemed amused, as though I were a puzzle to solve. But slowly, frustration crept into his eyes. He wasn't used to rejection, especially not from me, the girl who, in his memory, should have been pliant and adoring. I saw the flicker of irritation once, when he thought I wasn't looking. It gave me satisfaction deeper than words, because this time, he would not be the one holding power over me. This time, I would hold the reins, and though my heart ached every night with the memories of the son I had lost, I clung to one truth. If I played my cards carefully, if I made the right choices, perhaps I could protect him too in this life. Perhaps fate would not steal him from me again. But first, I had to master the art of leaving before I was abandoned. And so, I whispered to myself as I extinguished my lamp at night, this time I will not cling. This time I will walk away first. This time, my fate is mine. I had thought resisting him would be the hardest part of this new life. I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't turning away from his smiles, or cutting short his conversations, or ignoring the lingering weight of his gaze. No, the hardest part was pretending I didn't remember everything, because every time I saw him, I remembered how it ended. How those lips, now curved in charm, would one day spit cruel words. How those hands, now offering help, would one day pull my son away from me. How those eyes, now warm with feigned admiration, would one day turn cold as stone as he told me I was nothing. It took every ounce of strength not to let my hatred leak into my expression, to play the game quietly, subtly, like a woman who had never been broken before. But he knew something was off. He tried everything, small gifts, offers of escort, invitations to events my father would normally have encouraged me to attend. I accepted none of them, always polite, always smiling faintly, but never more. The more I resisted, the more persistent he became. And the more persistent he became, the more I noticed the cracks in his charm. In my past life, I hadn't seen it. I'd been blinded by love. But now, with clear eyes, I saw the arrogance in his posture, the way he expected the world to bend to him. I saw the irritation in his expression when I refused to bend. I saw the hunger in his eyes when he looked at me. Not love, not devotion, but possession. And most of all, I saw her, yes, her, the mistress. In my previous life, I hadn't met her until much later, but now, perhaps because I had shifted the course of fate, she appeared earlier than expected. It was at a charity gala, held in a glittering hall, filled with crystal chandeliers and the scent of expensive wine. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but I held myself with quiet dignity, my father at my side. He was speaking with a colleague when I felt it, an icy stare burning into me. I turned, and there she was, elegant, beautiful, dressed in crimson silk that clung to her like fire. Her lips were painted the same shade, her eyes sharp and assessing as they swept over me. Her gaze wasn't curious, it was hostile, and then I realized she already knew him. My heart twisted, but I forced my expression to remain calm. In my last life, I had been oblivious. I had thought she was just an assistant, just a passing shadow. I hadn't seen how deep her claws were until it was too late. But now, watching the way her eyes lingered on him across the hall, the way his lips curved faintly in acknowledgement before quickly schooling his expression, I knew. They were already entangled. The knowledge didn't break me this time. It steeled me. She approached eventually, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She smiled, sweet and poisonous. You must be the daughter of Mr. Lee. I've heard so much about you. Her voice dripped with honey, but her eyes glinted with challenge. Yes, I said calmly, inclining my head. And you are? Just a colleague, she replied, her smile widening. I work closely with certain people you may know. Her gaze flicked deliberately toward him. My father, oblivious to the undertones, chuckled warmly. It's good to see young people working hard these days. I only smiled politely, offering no ground, no reaction. Inside, however, my heart whispered bitterly, so this is where it begins. The two of you, circling each other like wolves, long before I ever realized. But not this time. This time, I would not be blind. Later that night, as I helped my father into the car, he asked, "What do you think of that young man? He seems very interested in you." I froze, my grip tightening on the car door. In my last life, this was where my father began to trust him, to encourage me to give him a chance. This was where the trap had begun. I forced a light laugh. Papa, I think he's too ambitious for my liking. I'd prefer someone steady, someone who doesn't make me feel like a trophy. My father blinked in surprise. That's quite an insight. You've grown, daughter. I only smiled faintly. If only you knew how much. In the following weeks, his demeanor began to shift. He still sought me out, but there was an edge to his persistence now. His smiles were tighter, his words a little sharper. You seem distant, he said one afternoon, when he found me reading in the library garden. Am I bothering you? I looked up from my book, meeting his eyes steadily. Yes, you are. The honesty stunned him. I saw the flicker of anger in his gaze, quickly hidden behind a chuckle. You're different from other women I know. I take that as a compliment, I replied coolly, closing my book. Inwardly, I remembered every cruel word he had ever thrown at me in our last life. His laughter when I begged him to remember his vow. His coldness when he told me love changes. This time, I would be the cold one. But the more I pulled away, the more the mistress drew near. I saw them together once, walking out of a meeting hall. He kept a respectable distance, but his eyes betrayed him. They softened when they turned to her, warmed in a way they never truly did for me. And she knew it. She caught my gaze across the courtyard and smiled triumphantly, as though she had already won. But I only smiled back, calm and unfazed, because this time I wasn't clinging to him. This time she wasn't taking anything from me. Let her gloat. Let her think she had won. The truth was simple. I was no longer in the game, and that, I knew, would be the thing neither of them expected. Because in my last life, I had been desperate, begging, holding on while they tore me apart. But in this life, I was already preparing to walk away, and when the time came, when he finally realized I wasn't his to keep, the shock on his face would be the sweetest revenge. That night, as I stood at my window watching the moonlight bathe the garden, I whispered softly to myself, "You broke your vow once, but you will not get the chance to break me again. This time, I will leave first. This time, I will be the one to shatter your world." And with that vow, my heart hardened. The pieces of my broken past had become the armor of my reborn future. The days after the gala stretched into weeks, each one painting clearer lines between us. He was a man used to pursuit, used to women bending to his charm, used to winning. And yet here I was, slipping out of his reach every time he tried to grasp me. I could see the frustration growing in his eyes, and though part of me wanted to sneer, "Now you know how it feels to be denied," I didn't waste much thought on it. I had bigger concerns, because while he was busy playing his game of possession, I was preparing for something far more important, my son. I still remembered the first time I had held him in my last life. He had been so small, so fragile, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. I remembered how his tiny fingers curled around mine, how his little cries filled my chest with love so deep it was terrifying. And I remembered how I had lost him. The mistress had stolen even that. She had whispered venom into his ears, turned him against me, painted me as the enemy. And because I had been weak, because I had been too broken to fight properly, I had watched my son walk away from me, choosing her, choosing them. The wound of that betrayal cut deeper than any blade. This time, I swore it would be different. This time, I would protect him with everything I had, even if it meant starting now, before he even existed. The first step was financial independence. In my past life, I had leaned too heavily on my father's wealth, and later on my husband's resources. I had believed love meant sharing everything, trusting blindly. But now I understood that love without respect was just a chain, and dependency only made the chain tighter. So I began to quietly study my father's businesses, not as a spoiled daughter listening idly, but as a student, a strategist. I took notes during his meetings, read the reports he left on his desk, asked subtle questions that made him raise his brows in surprise. "Since when did you care about balance sheets?" he teased one evening, sipping his tea. "Since I realized one day I may need to stand on my own," I replied lightly, hiding the steel behind my words. He chuckled, but I saw the glimmer of pride in his eyes, and I thought, good. If I can stand firmly on my own, no one, not a husband, not a mistress, will ever be able to strip me bare again. The second step was building quiet allies. I remembered the people who had helped me in small ways in my last life. The loyal maid who slipped me food when I cried in my locked bedroom. The old accountant who warned me when funds began mysteriously disappearing. They had been voices drowned out by my husband's dominance and the mistress's poison. But this time, I listened closely. I spoke gently to the maid, treating her like family. I shared tea with the accountant, asking him about his years of experience. It wasn't manipulation, it was respect. Respect I should have shown them before. And respect, I knew, often grew into loyalty. The third step was emotional strength. In my past life, I had broken too easily. I had poured all of myself into him, leaving nothing for me. And when he betrayed me, I had crumbled, helpless. But this time, I practiced letting go. When he sent me flowers, I didn't smell them. I gave them to the maid. When he wrote me notes, I didn't tuck them away. I burned them in the fireplace. When he cornered me with charming words, I didn't argue or cry. I simply smiled faintly and walked away. Each act was small, but each was a step in severing the invisible thread between us. I was training myself to stop clinging, to stop needing, to be strong enough to walk away when the time came. "Of course," he noticed. "You're colder than before," he said one afternoon, his voice tight with irritation. Have I done something wrong? I looked at him steadily, the faintest smile curving my lips. "No, you've done everything just as you always do." He blinked, frowning. "Then why? Maybe I've just grown up." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning he couldn't quite grasp. His pride wouldn't let him admit he was losing control, but I could see the unease flicker in his eyes. And behind him, lurking in the shadows of hallways and corners, the mistress watched with sharp eyes. She could sense it too, the shift in balance, the refusal to play by their rules. But she misunderstood. She thought I was still competing. She thought I was pulling away to make him chase harder. She thought I was still in love. Let her think so. Because the truth was, my heart was no longer chained to him. It was already bound to someone far more precious, my son. I began preparing a journal, a secret one, filled with notes and lessons, things I wanted to teach him one day, words I had never said to him in my last life. You are loved, even if the world tells you otherwise. Don't mistake charm for kindness. Respect is love's backbone. Never let anyone take yours away. I wrote and wrote, sometimes late into the night, my hand trembling as tears blurred my vision. This time, I would not let him be poisoned. This time, I would be strong enough for both of us, even if it meant leaving before they could tear us apart again. But fate, as always, had a way of testing me. One evening, as I returned from visiting one of my father's offices, I found him waiting by the gates of our home. His posture was stiff, his expression dark. "We need to talk," he said. I raised a brow. "About what?" "About us," he snapped, his patience fraying. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't be strung along. Either you admit you feel something, or you stop wasting my time." The old me would have panicked, begged, tried to prove my love. The new me only smiled faintly, my voice calm as I said, "Then perhaps you should stop wasting your own time." His eyes widened, shock flashing across his face. For once, he was the one left speechless. I walked past him, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the stone path, each one a quiet declaration. This time, I leave first, and I knew, deep down, the war between us had only just begun. I once believed that silence was safety, that if I kept my head down, if I simply endured, storms would pass on their own. But Rebirth had taught me the truth. Storms don't pass. They grow, they circle, they devour, until you stand up and face them. And so, as I continued to resist him, the storm in his eyes began to darken. At first it was just subtle, his laughter turning a little sharper, his charm cracking at the edges. But soon, frustration bled through in every encounter. One afternoon, he found me in the courtyard, trimming roses with gloved hands. "Why do you avoid me?" he demanded, his voice tight, his jaw clenched. I didn't look up. "I don't avoid you. I simply don't chase you." His breath hitched, whether from anger or surprise. I couldn't tell. "Most women would kill for my attention," he said, his tone cutting. "Then let them have it," I replied calmly, snipping another stem. The silence that followed was heavy. I felt his stare burn against the side of my face, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of looking up. In my past life, his words would have crushed me. I would have twisted myself into knots to prove I was worthy. But this time I knew better. His arrogance wasn't proof of his worth. It was proof of his emptiness. And the more I denied him, the closer she slithered. The Mistress. She had grown bolder since the gala, where once she lingered in shadows. Now she placed herself directly in my path. At a business dinner my father hosted, she slid into the seat across from me, her crimson lips curving into a smug smile. "You know," she said softly, as though speaking to a friend, "some men are like roses, beautiful, but full of thorns. They're not meant to be held by everyone." I set down my glass of water, meeting her gaze evenly. "And some women mistake poison for perfume. They think what they hold is rare, but all it does is rot them from within." Her smile faltered for the briefest moment before she leaned back, chuckling as though amused. "You're clever, but cleverness doesn't always win." "No," I agreed, my voice cool. "But endurance does." She tilted her head, studying me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. She was used to women breaking down, to rivals cowering or clinging. She wasn't used to someone standing so calmly in the storm, and in that moment, I knew I had unsettled her. But unsettling her meant stirring him. Too. Not long after, he confronted me again, this time in my father's study. I had been organizing ledgers when he closed the door behind him, his movements sharp. "You think you can play with me?" His voice was low, dangerous. I glanced up, unbothered. "Play with you? I hardly think of you at all." His hand slammed against the desk, rattling the ink bottle. "Enough games. You act as though I mean nothing. Yet I know. I can see it in your eyes. You feel something. I let the silence stretch, my gaze steady, until finally I said, perhaps what you see is simply the reflection of your own obsession. His face twisted, anger warring with disbelief. He had never been denied like this, and I realized, with chilling clarity, that this was the moment he began to truly hate me. That night, as the moon cast silver light through my window, I sat with my journal open, my pen trembling. My son, I wrote, if you ever doubt your worth, remember this. Love is not chains. It is wings. Anyone who tries to bind you with cruelty does not love you. They only love control. Tears blurred the words, but I didn't stop. Writing to him gave me strength, reminded me why I endured. And it was then I made my first decisive move toward freedom. I approached my father the next morning, my voice steady. Papa, I said, I'd like to take over managing one of the smaller branches of your company. I need to learn, not as your daughter, but as someone who can stand on her own. He blinked in surprise. That will not be easy. People will doubt you. Then let them doubt, I replied softly. I need to do this. For a long moment he studied me, and then he nodded slowly. Very well, I'll give you the Northern Textile branch. It's struggling. If you can turn it around, you'll prove your strength. Relief swelled in my chest, not because I wanted to prove myself to the world, but because this was my shield, my lifeline. With my own income, my own footing, no one could ever strip me bare again. But word of my new responsibility spread quickly, and not everyone was pleased. At the next gathering, the mistress smirked at me, her eyes glinting with malice. So you're playing businesswoman now? How cute. I only smiled faintly. Better than playing mistress. Her face flushed, her composure cracking for the first time. And I realized then that every step I took away from him, every wall I built for myself, weakened her grip as well. Because without my despair to feed on, without my tears to gloat over, their victory meant nothing. Still, I wasn't foolish enough to think the battle was over. No, the storm was only growing. His anger, her malice, their obsession. But so was my resolve. And as I looked out at the rising dawn that morning, I whispered to myself, this is just the beginning. The breaking point is near. And when it comes, I will not shatter. I will rise. When I first stepped into the textile branch my father had given me, I could feel the skepticism pressing down on me like heavy fog. The employees whispered as I passed, she's just the boss's daughter. She'll play at management for a month and then disappear. She doesn't know anything about real work. In my past life, their words would have pierced me. I would have wilted under their doubt, desperate to prove myself for all the wrong reasons. But now their whispers only fueled me. I wasn't here to win their approval. I wasn't here to impress him. I was here to build something for me, and for the child I knew fate would one day place in my arms. The branch was struggling. Sales were low. Employees unmotivated. Machines outdated. The manager looked at me like I was a burden, a little girl playing dress-up. So I rolled up my sleeves and proved him wrong. I spent hours studying the ledgers, tracing every loss, every wasted coin. I walked the factory floors, listening to the workers, asking them what slowed them down, what frustrated them. They were startled at first. No one had ever asked their opinions before, but slowly their wariness turned to curiosity. One seamstress, her fingers calloused from years of work, whispered to me one evening, "Miss, you're not like the others. You actually listen." Her words warmed me more than any compliment from him ever had. And in that moment, I realized respect wasn't demanded. It was earned, quietly, steadily, with every action. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, the branch began to change. I negotiated better contracts with suppliers, using knowledge I remembered from my last life, mistakes I had seen others make, traps I now avoided. I convinced my father to invest in a few updated machines, promising I'd double the return. I introduced simple incentives for the workers, small bonuses for extra effort, recognition for dedication. The factory floor buzzed with new life. Sales slowly rose, and for the first time, people looked at me not as a spoiled daughter, but as a leader. The satisfaction that filled me wasn't pride, it was freedom. But not everyone was pleased. He appeared at the branch one afternoon, unannounced. His presence filled the office, commanding as always. "I hear you've been busy," he said, his tone edged with mockery. I met his gaze evenly. "I manage what's mine." His lips curved into a smirk. "Yours? You sound so certain, but you've always belonged under someone else's wing, haven't you? First your father's, then." "Not yours." I cut in sharply. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. His eyes narrowed, the smirk fading. He wasn't used to being interrupted. He wasn't used to being denied. And I could see it. It stung. He left soon after. But I knew he would not stay away for long. The mistress came next. She arrived in a dress too fine for a factory floor. Her perfume thick in the air. She looked around with disdain, her lips curling. "So this is your little project," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "How quaint. But do you really think playing at business will keep his attention?" I smiled faintly, folding my hands on the desk. "I'm not doing this for his attention. I'm doing this so that when he betrays me, and he will, I'll already have everything I need." Her eyes widened, shock flashing across her perfect face. For once, she was the one without words, and it was delicious. She recovered quickly, masking it with a laugh. "You speak as though you don't care, but we both know women like you always care." "Then perhaps," I said calmly, "you don't know me as well as you think." She left soon after, her heels clicking angrily on the tile, and I knew I had struck a wound. That night, I returned home exhausted, my hands ink-stained from ledgers, my body sore from walking the floors. But as I sat by my window, gazing at the stars, I felt a strange peace, because in my past life, I had never known this strength. I had been nothing but a shadow in his world, clinging desperately to his light. But now, I was building my own flame. I placed a hand over my stomach, my heart whispering words to the future. "My son, when you come into this world, you will never see me broken. You will never see me beg for scraps of love. You will see me strong, and you will know that your mother fought for you before you were even born." Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from sorrow. They were from resolve. The first major success came 3 months later. The Northern Textile branch reported its first profit in years. Modest, but steady, a sign of revival. My father's advisors were stunned. My father himself looked at me with new eyes, pride shining in them. "You've done well," he said, his voice soft. "Better than I expected." I smiled faintly. "I told you I would." But the news traveled further than I wished, because when he heard of my success, his expression darkened. I knew it without even seeing it. I could feel it, the way a hunted animal feels the presence of its predator. And when the mistress heard, her jealousy burned hotter, because strength was the one thing she couldn't take from me, and in their eyes, my independence wasn't victory, it was rebellion. But I didn't care, because for the first time, I wasn't living in their shadow. I was living in my own light, and I swore, as I looked at the ledger with its neat black numbers, that I would never again let anyone reduce me to nothing. I wish I could tell you that life after that graveside vow was perfect, that we stayed happy, that love carried us through everything. But if life were that simple, I wouldn't be here telling you this story. It started subtly, so subtly that I didn't even notice at first. Arjun came home late more often. At first, he blamed work, meetings, late-night conferences, deadlines. I believed him. After all, hadn't we just sworn eternal loyalty at my father's grave? How could I even doubt him? But soon, the excuses piled up, and the warmth I once felt when he walked into the house, it began to fade. He would come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He would glance at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. His smile, my favorite smile, started belonging less to me and more to someone else I didn't yet know existed. And then came the night that shattered the fragile illusion. It was past midnight. He hadn't come home. Our son, Arav, had been crying, asking where his father was. I called him again and again, but no answer. Finally, exhaustion took me, and I fell asleep with Arav in my arms. When the door finally clicked open at dawn, I forced myself to stay awake. He walked in quietly, as if sneaking back into a place he no longer felt he belonged. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes guilty. I asked him softly, "Where were you?" For a moment, he froze. Then came the practice lie. Work, a late-night project. Don't worry, it's nothing. But a wife knows when her husband lies. And that night, the vow he made at my father's grave began to crack in my heart. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. He still played the role of a husband, still called himself Arav's father. But something essential had shifted. Something sacred had broken. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, I discovered her. She wasn't just anyone. She was someone from his past. The woman he once claimed was a mistake. The woman he swore had no place in his life anymore. His mistress. But this time, she wasn't just lingering in the shadows. She had stepped boldly into the light, into the place that was mine. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, because not only had he chosen her, he had chosen her with our son still in his arms. That was the moment I realized. My vows alone couldn't hold a marriage together. He had already broken his, and little did he know. In the life that was about to come, I wouldn't wait around for him to betray me again. This time, I would leave first. I used to think betrayal was something you only discovered when you caught someone red-handed. But in truth, betrayal is a slow poison. You taste it in the way their eyes avoid yours, in the silence between conversations, in the hollow of their embrace. By now, I already knew Arjun's heart wasn't mine anymore, but knowing something in your mind and feeling it pierce your soul are two different things. The final blow came on a bright afternoon. Arav and I were out at the market, and as fate would have it, I saw them, Arjun, her, walking side by side like a perfect couple. She was holding his arm, my husband's arm, and the way he looked at her, like she was his entire world, made my knees weak. That was the look he used to reserve only for me. But what broke me wasn't just seeing them together. It was seeing Arav's tiny hand reaching out from the stroller, and her bending down, cooing at him, as if she had any right, as if she could step into my shoes, as a mother. That night, I confronted Arjun. My voice trembled, but my words were sharp. "Arjun, do you love her?" For a long moment, he stayed silent. His silence screamed louder than any confession. Finally, he looked at me and said words that still echo like a curse in my ears. "She makes me feel alive in ways you don't anymore." Alive, as if the years I spent supporting him, the nights I stayed awake with Arav, the sacrifices I made, none of it made him alive. And then he added, like twisting a knife deeper into my chest, "She's not just my choice. She's Arav's future too." My breath caught. What did that mean? It meant he wasn't only choosing her over me, he was choosing her with our son. I felt my father's grave rise in my memory, the vows Arjun made there, the promises he swore on the man who raised me. And in that moment, all I could think was, he broke them without hesitation. The love story I thought was eternal had turned into a battlefield, where I was the only casualty. But here's the thing. What Arjun never expected was that I wasn't going to play the role of the abandoned wife forever. No, the day was coming when I would walk away first, and in that moment, it wouldn't be me who shattered. It would be him. The next morning, I woke to a silence that felt heavier than any words. Arav was asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with the innocence of a world untouched by betrayal. I envied him for that peace. But I couldn't stay blind. I couldn't pretend. The mistress had crossed every boundary. She was no longer subtle. She called him in the middle of the night, came to the house under the guise of business meetings, and laughed too freely when she saw me. And Arjun, he no longer hid. No whispered excuses, no feigned loyalty, no charm that could ever fool me again. His choice was made. That day, the breaking point came. My father had arranged a family gathering at our estate, a casual brunch, meant to celebrate a small business success of mine. I expected pleasantries, laughter, perhaps a toast or two. Instead, I saw them before anyone else did. Arjun and the mistress arrived together. Not just together, he was holding her hand. My husband, the man who swore eternal loyalty at my father's grave, holding her hand like a trophy. The guests murmured, eyes widened. Whispers spread. The room's warmth drained instantly, and I realized the betrayal wasn't just private anymore. It was public. He tried to excuse it, tried to smile, tried to tell everyone it was complicated. But the words sounded hollow, empty. His charm had no effect this time. I stood quietly, letting the storm unfold around me. I could have shouted. I could have begged. I could have clawed at him, demanding what was rightfully mine. But I didn't. Because this time, I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Power doesn't come from clinging to someone else's love. Power comes from walking away while they remain trapped in their own mistakes. I smiled faintly, my lips curving with quiet defiance, and then I walked out. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't plead. I didn't look back. Every eye in the room followed me. The whispers grew louder. She's leaving. Can you believe this? Her husband. But I ignored them all. Outside, I breathed in the fresh air, feeling my chest expand with clarity and freedom. My son's future, my life, my dignity. I would protect it all. That day, I didn't just leave a room. I left the cage of betrayal, the chains of broken promises, and the weight of a love that had turned toxic. And I knew, deep down, that my departure would haunt him more than any argument, any fight, any pleading could ever have done. Because this time, I was leaving first. The moment I stepped out of that estate, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Every betrayal, every broken vow, every sleepless night, released. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time, I wasn't moving blindly. I was walking toward freedom, toward myself, toward the life I deserved. The first weeks were the hardest. I had to rebuild everything, my reputation, my income, my identity as a woman who could stand alone. I rented a small apartment, not extravagant, but warm. Arav's laughter filled the rooms, soft and pure, and reminded me why I had to endure, why I had to survive. He didn't deserve the poison that had seeped into our lives. I enrolled in advanced management courses online, sharpening my skills. I networked quietly, making friends who respected me for my intellect and kindness, not for my status or marriage. And every day I wrote to him, letters I would never send, letters to Arjun, to the mistress, to the world that had doubted me, letters that reminded me who I was and who I would become. You cannot take what I refuse to give. You cannot break me if I walk away first. It became my mantra. Slowly, the rebirth took shape. The first breakthrough came when a small investor, impressed by my work at my father's branch, offered to fund a new venture for me, a boutique textile line, fully under my control. I accepted immediately, knowing this was more than business. It was power, independence, and a declaration that I no longer needed anyone else to define me. As I poured myself into the venture, I began to notice subtle changes in the people around me. Friends I had lost touch with returned. Mentors who had once ignored me now sought my opinion. And Arav, oh sweet Arav, he was thriving in the calm I had created. His laughter became my music, his small hand in mine, my anchor. Meanwhile, word of my departure and new venture had reached Arjun. He tried to call, to text, to convince me to come back, but each message, each call was met with silence. I no longer craved his attention. I no longer needed his validation. The mistress tried too, sending veiled threats and thinly disguised invitations to reconnect, but I ignored them. My life was no longer theirs to manipulate, and the strangest thing happened. The more I distanced myself, the more powerless they became. Their obsession could no longer control me. Their manipulation failed to pierce the shield I had built with my own hands. One evening, as I closed my office after a long day, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I remembered the day he broke his vow at my father's grave, the day he chose her over me and our son. I remembered the rage, the despair, the helplessness I had felt, but now I felt something entirely different. I felt strength. I felt peace. I felt free. And I whispered softly to myself, to the universe, to the son I was protecting even before he was born. You will never know the weight of someone else's betrayal. You will grow in love, not fear. And your mother will always fight for you first. Even when the world turns against you. This was my rebirth. The old me, the woman who had clung, who had begged, who had broken, no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who loved fiercely but wisely. A woman who would walk away before being destroyed again. A woman who would rise. And rise I did. The months that followed were nothing short of transformative. My boutique textile line flourished beyond even my expectations. Orders poured in from across the country, and soon I had expanded into online sales internationally. Arav loved helping me choose colors and patterns, his laughter filling the studio, his tiny fingers brushing against fabric like an artist in training. Every step I took was deliberate, every decision mine alone. I was no longer defined by a broken vow, a cheating husband, or a jealous mistress. I was defined by my courage, my intelligence, and my love for the son I was protecting with every ounce of my being. And then they came, Arjun, the mistress. He had heard of my success, of my independence, and he appeared at my new showroom, dressed impeccably, trying to look calm and collected. But the moment his eyes landed on me, I saw it. Panic, confusion, that unfamiliar vulnerability that comes when control slips away. The mistress followed, her perfectly composed exterior, faltering as she realized she wasn't facing a frightened, submissive woman. She was facing someone who had risen, someone who had built an empire out of ashes. He tried the usual charm. I came to talk, to explain. I smiled faintly. Explain what? How easily you discarded a vow. How you chose her over your own son. He hesitated, caught off guard by the coldness in my tone. His rehearsed words faltered. He started, but I interrupted. You see, Arjun, I'm no longer the woman who needed you. I'm no longer the one who begged for scraps of your affection. And the child you claim to love, my son, will never be left at the mercy of your indecision again. The mistress stepped forward, trying to assert dominance. You don't understand. He chose me. I laughed softly, a sound devoid of anger, full of certainty. He may have chosen you in your fantasy, but reality is different. I walk my own path now, and the truth is, you were never a threat. You were merely a shadow I stepped past. Their faces paled. For the first time, they were unarmed, powerless against someone they had underestimated. I walked past them, Arav holding my hand. The sound of my heels clicking on the polished floor echoed like a declaration. I was no longer theirs to manipulate. I was free. I was victorious. And as we exited into the sunlight, I felt the warmth of life, of hope, of a future built by my own hands. Arjun's eyes followed us, wide with disbelief. The mistress's lips trembled. Neither of them could comprehend that I had left first, and that leaving had given me everything they had tried to take. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't hatred. It's thriving while they remain shackled by their own choices. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation. I had rebuilt myself from scratch. I had protected my son before he even had a say in this world. And now, I was unstoppable. That's all for today, folks. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.